I'm struggling right now. I've gone through some big changes in my career and my life. Gotten rid of my agent, got rid of my first wife. I gave her everything. So I'm starting over from scratch. Just signed away everything in December.
Chip Foose spent decades building a reputation that seemed impossible to tarnish. Then came the bankruptcy, the bitter fallout with Boyd Coddington, the talent exodus, and a series of revelations that made fans question whether they had ever really known the man behind the masterpiece. But even those controversies aren't the darkest part of this story. Because the deeper you dig into Chip Foose's past, the more shocking the truth becomes. So, what exactly could be worse than the known controversies that are tied to his name? Join us as we break down what happened to Chip Foose and why it is so hard for fans to watch. The partner who went to prison. From the early 1970s to the early 2000s, way before the controversies that threatened everything he has worked extremely hard for, Chip was just a car enthusiast who built his automotive business the old-fashioned way, through shop floors, sketch pads, and award-winning custom works that the automotive industry respected long before the public had any idea who he was. By 2005, Chip had reached the peak of his commercial reach. Overhaulin was pulling strong numbers for TLC, and at that year's SEMA show, he announced a major licensing deal with Unique Performance of Dallas, Texas, to produce a limited run of Foose-designed cars. The lineup consisted of a 1969 Camaro convertible in a planned 300-car production run, a Mustang Stallion, a Challenger, and the Hemisphere supercar concept. People began ordering and making down payments, sometimes more than $200,000, because Chip Foose's name was the guarantee behind the product. That arrangement seemed to work for 2 years. Then, on November 1st, 2007, all that Chip Foose had built his name on walked straight into a federal crime scene. Police simultaneously executed search warrants at 4 different Unique Performance locations throughout the Dallas area after a confidential informant told them that vehicles were being moved between locations to keep them from being found by law enforcement. What they discovered inside those facilities was something that took investigators a moment to fully process. 61 vintage vehicles were in various states of construction, and most had fake VN plates. They had been ground off physically and fitted with fake serial numbers, and the surfaces beneath them deeply scratched. Every customer waiting on one of those 61 cars was waiting for something they could not legally title, register, or drive on a public highway. The case carried 25 felony counts of fraud and title washing, and became a federal issue when stolen vehicles from other states were discovered. The company's assets were eventually sold at auction, in part to repay customers and former employees who had nothing to do with the scheme. The U.S. attorney in Dallas ultimately decided not to pursue the federal case, but the Dallas County District Attorney's Office took it up instead, meaning the legal fallout continued long after the company collapsed. 8 days after the raid, Chip did the only thing left available to him. On November 9, 2007, he issued a formal press release announcing that all licensing and business activities were suspended immediately, affecting every vehicle produced under the Foose name. He stated that he had spent 8 months trying to sort out Unique's internal problems before ultimately deciding that a clean separation was the only viable way forward. There was no suggestion that Chip had any knowledge of the fraud in advance, but the customers who lost their money had paid it precisely because his name was attached to the product, and that association did not disappear with the press release. When Chip left, customers who had put down deposits were already suing Unique Performance, claiming some $7 million in about 50 to 60 unfulfilled orders. Foose Design's own press release said the company was consulting legal staff to consider possible action against Unique Performance, meaning Chip was both a potential plaintiff against his former partner and the man whose name every defrauded customer had trusted. No public accounting of what unique performance ultimately cost him included the legal expenses attendant on that position for both parties to the dispute. What happened in the next few years suggests that the financial consequences of that time went far deeper than his public statements ever admitted. The hidden dark side of overhauling. There was a side of the show that made Chip Foose famous that the cameras were never meant to see. Overhauling completed over 170 builds across its various runs and became one of the most emotionally recognizable formats in automotive television history. But there were structural realities baked into the way the show was made that the production was never particularly eager to talk about. The 8-day deadline was real, and what it was quietly doing to the people inside that shop was something the network had no interest in filming. Crew members regularly worked on less than 4 hours of sleep between shifts. In the pilot build alone, Chip worked 40-hour stretches, losing 27 pounds over the course of a single project. And that pace didn't slow once the show went into series. The format was a reveal on a certain day as to whether the car was ready or not, and a few owners found issues after taking their vehicles home, including mechanical failures, paint that had not adhered properly, and parts that came loose during early drives. The show had a policy of addressing these complaints after delivery, and by most accounts it lived up to it. But the distance between the slick emotional reveal and what some owners actually drove home never made it into any of the series' promotional material. But the deadline and the sleep deprivation were not even the worst of it. The format itself had a financial loophole that the show never told the people getting those cars about, and it made some of the most emotional moments in the series a lot darker. Each finished vehicle was worth about $150,000 or more, and suddenly owners faced large tax bills on a gift they had not planned for or budgeted for. Some people were unable to pay the bill and sold the car shortly after they bought it. It was said Chip was upset when he first learned it was happening, but eventually came to accept a sale that helped a family financially, was still in keeping with the spirit of what the show had tried to do. Some of the most emotional moments of the show ended with the recipient selling the car to pay off a surprise tax debt, a detail that never came up in any coverage of overhauling during its entire run. By the time the original run ended, the physical toll of the format could no longer be denied, even within the production. Published reporting noted that the deadline was starting to weigh on Foose himself toward the end of the original seasons. When Velocity announced the show's return in 2012, its own press materials described it as an all-new format, a phrase that wasn't expanded on in any detail. Whatever structural changes there were between the original run and the revival have never been publicly documented. But the network decided to market the difference rather than present the return as simply more of the same. A show sold to audiences as proof that Chip Foose could build anything in 8 days was being relaunched under language that quietly admitted something had to change about the original format. But that was not the full scope of the automotive community's criticism. At least one publication argued directly that the show had done measurable damage to the craft by creating a deadline template that lower-budget productions copied without anything close to Chip's team or talent, conditioning audiences to expect a full restoration in a week when experienced builders knew a quality job could take a year or more. But critics who followed the show closely have noted a pattern of behavior from Chip that went beyond production pressure. In several episodes, he made major, irreversible changes to cars without the owner's knowledge, including, in at least one documented case, cutting the roof off a 1956 Chevy Bel Air, whose owner had specifically asked for the car to be restored to its original condition. The owner had no voice in the decision. The only legal basis the show had for making changes the actual owner never approved was that a family member signed a waiver on their behalf. What happened to the business in the years immediately after the original cancellation is a question the public narrative of his career has never properly answered. The studio that closed and the lawsuit nobody talked about. Chip Foose closed down his Foose Design Studio in 2012. Financial problems closed the Huntington Beach, California, headquarters that produced Overhaulin' and where some of the most celebrated builds in recent automotive history had been conceived. This came the same year Overhaulin' returned for its second run on Velocity, meaning a high-profile television comeback was announced at the exact moment the business behind it was contracting. The fallout from unique performance, the end of the original run, and the loss of licensing revenue increased the pressure on a business model that depended on multiple income streams working in a coordinated manner. Then, in 2014, something happened that almost no coverage of his career has ever stopped to look at. There was a lawsuit, reportedly involving Foose Design, which was dismissed after reportedly reaching a settlement figure of approximately $10 million. Little was ever reported about the specific parties involved or the nature of the claims being made, and because the case never went to trial, it never had the opportunity to become the kind of drawn-out public spectacle that tends to follow figures of Chip's profile. The details, for the most part, were buried quietly alongside the dismissal. A lawsuit for $10 million against a television personality and custom car designer, however settled, offers a measure of legal and financial exposure that has been almost entirely missing from the regular coverage of his career. One observer of the divorce settlement noted how Chip had agreed to give Lynn the lion's share of the assets, and speculated that what she had agreed never to disclose publicly in exchange for that settlement was the real story behind his concessions. There has been no proof of that speculation, but it has never been refuted. Through all of it, he kept the Foose Design brand going, rebuilt with a smaller footprint, and kept producing work. The truth is, the years between 2009 and 2014 were far more turbulent than the carefully maintained image of steady post-Overhaulin' success ever suggested. And as he was navigating all of that, something had already begun fracturing at home, something his wife would eventually document in a courthouse years before the public was allowed to know it had happened. The paperwork that was filed before anyone was watching. This is the detail that changes the whole timeline, and almost no coverage of this story has got this right. Most accounts place the start of the proceedings in April 2022, but they are all wrong. Lynn Foose filed the petition for dissolution on November 18, 2019, case number 19D009387, in the Superior Court of Orange County. What was happening in April 2022 were discovery proceedings, not the initial filing, including the issuing of subpoenas to a company called Antique Auto Sheet Metal Inc. in Ohio. If attorneys are subpoenaing automotive businesses across state lines in a divorce case, that's an indication of the kinds of financial forensics that go well beyond the usual marital split. Someone had been watching very closely where the money had gone and how the business assets were built up, and they had been watching quietly for years before any of it became public knowledge. Lynn had charged Chip with numerous affairs with various women, and according to sources close to the couple, he reportedly did not privately deny the accusations, offering no pushback to those around him while remaining publicly silent on the matter. And then there is the detail that turns the whole timeline into something much more difficult to face. In February 2021, a photo of Chip and a woman named Kathleen appeared on Facebook, posted by a real estate agent named Jennifer Holland, who captioned it, "Match Made in Heaven." That was in February of 2021. Lynn's divorce wasn't finalized until December 2023. Chip and Kathleen were married in May 2025. which is that while the divorce proceedings Lynn started in November 2019 were actively going through the courts, including the multi-state subpoenas and financial discovery, Chip had already moved on to a relationship being publicly documented on social media. In a 2024 interview, Chip Foose confirmed that the divorce was finalized in December 2023 and added that he gave her everything in the settlement. He had his personal car collection and tools after the split, but he no longer had a workshop. The settlement has taken a big bite out of a net worth that was reported as high as $18.5 million at its peak, and is now estimated to be between $12 and $14 million by 2025, according to industry sources. Lynn was more than a wife. She was a trained lawyer who had been the operational backbone of Foose Design since 1998, who understood every financial aspect of what he had built, and who was now issuing subpoenas to his business partners from a courthouse while he was appearing on camera and posting on social media as if nothing had changed. Beneath all of it, the studio closures, the lawsuits, the divorce playing out in court while a new relationship was already going public, were two losses that nobody in the automotive press ever thought to mention. The grief that nobody mentioned. Before any of all these controversies involving Chip, there was a loss that the automotive press has never once bothered to mention. His sister Amy died December 19, 1985. She was just 16 years old. She died of Hutchinson-Gilford progeria syndrome, which had accelerated the biological aging of her body to about 7 to 10 times the normal rate. When he lost her, Chip was 22. He has never spoken at length about what that loss did to him in what should have been the early years of his career. But the commitment he made in response to it has been a constant throughout his whole career. He later served as vice chairman of the California chapter of the Progeria Research Foundation, was named Grand Marshal of SEMA's Show and Shine public car show for children's charities, and participated in groups such as Child Help and the Victory Junction Gang Camp. The Progeria Research Foundation established the Amy Award in her memory, and it is still given out in her name. As recently as January 2025, he auctioned a custom-built 2021 F-150 at Barrett-Jackson Scottsdale, raising $150,000 for the Progeria Research Foundation, the most recent public proof that whatever else has collapsed around him, that commitment has never wavered. And then, 33 years later, came the second. His father, Sam Foose, died on November 28, 2018, after battling cancer. He was 83 years old. Sam had started working on cars at 14, been a shop foreman for the legendary customizer Gene Winfield, had produced full-size customs for AMT, had built vehicles for the film industry and technical equipment for government agencies, and finally opened his own shop, Project Design, where a 7-year-old Chip first picked up a sanding block. Sam had taught Chip how to draw ovals for wheels, with perspective and shading, before any school could get to him. When Sam died, Chip lost not only a father, but the original source of all that he had built his identity around. Chip was absorbing the death of the man who made him who he was, while entering a legal process that would last 4 years. That loss, in November 2018, came just over a year before Lynn filed for divorce in November 2019. Both these losses happened right under the noses of no one watching. The Chip Foose the public saw through SEMA appearances and YouTube uploads was a man battling grief, dealing with multi-state legal proceedings, facing allegations of infidelity he reportedly never privately denied, and building a new relationship that was already showing up on social media while the old marriage was still being dissolved in court. What the public record has never fully answered is not whether one piece of this story is true. How much of the man the world fell in love with was ever the whole story, and who exactly was responsible for keeping the rest of it out of focus for so long. So what do you think is going to happen to Chip from here? And given everything that has unfolded over the past year, do you genuinely believe he still has what it takes to fight his way back to the top? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.